So we'll go ahead and start the meeting. Janet, did you want to run the meeting? You're our vice president.
No, thank you.
So.
No, thank you.
Okay, you're fine.
Barely.
It's going to be easy to run because if I falter, Nadia will pick it up. But I think, in fact, shall we just go ahead and do our introductions and then we'll turn it over to the main item at hand, and we have our attorney from EDC to speak to us about that. So I'm Ken Huff. I'm executive director on the staff here. Janet.
My name is Janet Blevins. I am on the board for SBCAN.
And Morel.
I am Morel Brooks, and I am here with Citizens Planning Association. We're very interested in Bailey Avenue annexations. Hi.
Thank you. Welcome. And Karen?
I'm Karen Mays, and I'm just a member at large and a member of the League of Women Voters.
Welcome. And Nadia?
Yeah, my name's Nadia. I'm also on staff with SBCAN.
And Vijaya?
Oops. Hi, everyone. I am a member of SBCAN and a member of the League of Women Voters and on the board of the EDC. I'm here to support Maggie.
Right. And Gary Michaels.
Hi, I'm working at, I'm watching this from my desk at home in Santa Maria. Just what can I say about myself? Technologist, E-rate consultant, doing some work, enjoying and listening to what you have to say. Thank you.
And yeah, welcome. And thank you, everybody. Everybody here is members, so this is great. I like it. And so we have Alicia Rossler from EDC to speak to us tonight about the Bailey Avenue corridor and others.
Or Maggie Hall, perhaps.
Did I promise Alicia? I think Alicia won't be making it, but I am here.
No, we knew it was you, Maggie.
We did. And I'm looking at 4 different emails from EDC today and getting confused. So anyway, please go ahead, Maggie.
Yeah, no problem. I guess it's good news that we have a lot of action happening with SBCAN in general, but also no shortage of threats locally. So I get my cases mixed up sometimes too. Yes, I'm Maggie Hall. I'm a senior attorney at the Environmental Defense Center based in Santa Barbara here. And I think most of you are quite familiar with us. We're an environmental law firm in Santa Barbara. We're the only one of our kind between between San Francisco and LA. And we work to empower the local community by protecting and enhancing the local environment through education, advocacy, and then legal action where necessary. So that is our function. And I've been at EDC for about 8.5 years now as an attorney. So we are, the case that we're talking about today arises out of the city of Lompoc's longstanding efforts with respect to 2 properties that are designated as prime farmland along Bailey Avenue, and essentially, wanting to convert these 2 properties. So prime farmland is the highest quality agricultural land according to the California Department of Conservation, and both of these properties are designated as such. The 2 properties consist of about 137 acres of prime farmland, and they play an important role as part of the city's rural-urban interface. I'm happy to share a little map, if that is helpful, just to give you a sense of the city and the 2 areas that we're talking about. As you can see, very much on the periphery, designated as prime farmland, and a dangerous precedent if the city is allowed to keep expanding in that direction. So we'll stop that. So basically, in order to convert this land, ultimately, the first step that the city is currently engaged in is a process where they're asking the local agency formation commission to amend their sphere of influence. And I know some of you are very well versed in LAFCO and SOIs, but I will assume that some of you have never heard of LAFCO or an SOI. So essentially, it's this great agency that was created to reduce urban sprawl, tasked with dealing with exactly this type of situation and oversee orderly boundaries and development over time. And they have jurisdiction on issues such as the city's efforts to expand. So their first step is to amend their sphere of influence. And a sphere of influence is the area that essentially demarcates the probable physical boundary and service area of a government entity like the city. And the reason this is important is because any annexations of new property must be consistent with the sphere of influence. So if approved at this first stage, then the city would move forward with the next step of attempting to annex the Bailey Ave properties in their ultimate goal of developing and converting this land. So on September 30th, 2022, their application to LAFCO to do the sphere of influence amendment was deemed complete, which triggers some regulatory deadlines for LAFCO to put this matter on a hearing. And they have told us that they plan to hold a hearing on the SOI on December 8th. We haven't yet received the agenda, so that's not yet confirmed. But our understanding at this point is that it will occur in Santa Maria with an option to appear remotely as well as in person. But again, all of that subject to getting an actual agenda and having this item on the agenda. But right now we're flagging December 8th as the current hearing date. So SBCAN has been working on this issue for quite some time. There have been some previous efforts. Most recently, the city first started to move forward with this effort through a joint application to amend their sphere of influence and annex, and then decided to break them up. So now we're back at the stage of just looking at the sphere of influence amendment. But through that process, we've submitted comments articulating our position in opposing this effort. So essentially, the high-level concerns that we have articulated are that the city's proposal fails to conserve high-value farmland. Clearly, this is high-value prime agricultural land. So this would be, running right against that important policy. It would fail to promote feasible infill development, which is preferred. And then it would not facilitate orderly growth, and it would be prioritizing development of, or fails to prioritize development of non-prime farmland over prime farmland, which this is already designated. And all of that language kind of comes from a variety of sources. So the sources that govern LAFCO in this decision are the law that created LAFCOs, which is called the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act. And that has a lot of great language encouraging the preservation of high-value agricultural land. For example, it creates a priority for urban infill development over development outside beyond existing spheres of influence. And that's all in the California Government Code. Another source of law that we're looking at is Santa Barbara County LAFCO policy itself. For example, it states that high value agricultural lands should be maintained in agriculture and in general should not be included in an urban service sphere of influence. So there's a lot of really great sources that provide, really strong protections of this type of agricultural land, in particular in a situation with the city of Lompoc, where we would want to see infill development over urban sprawl. And we've detailed all of these policies and sections of the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act in our previous comment letter. So I'd be happy to circulate those with those who are interested. So that is sort of high level what the concerns are. And in terms of the procedure for next steps, the deadline for submitting comments will be up until the hearing date itself of December 8th, but we would encourage that comments be submitted earlier to have fuller consideration by LAFCO. So we're aiming for, I believe, November 28th or the 30th, somewhere in there. And we will be sending, EDC does action alerts through our email. And I don't know if it makes sense for SBCAN to share this language as well, maybe around the same time, but we'll do an action alert that provides information about where to comment and some suggested talking points for how to comment. So we would encourage everyone to submit comments around that time of November, late November, and then to attend and participate in the hearing and express your concerns about why we don't want to see this important ag land converted, or at least the first step of not amending the sphere of influence, because it is somewhat of a wonky first procedural step, but it's all in the spirit of, obviously they wouldn't want to amend their sphere of influence if they didn't want to annex the land, and they wouldn't want to annex if they didn't want to develop. So clearly the end game is conversion of this land. So that's the main threat. So yeah, in terms of next steps, comments, attending the hearing, if you do want to sign up for our EDC's email list to get that action alert, otherwise we can make sure that you get information through Ken or Nadia at SBCAN. And that's kind of the main overview that I was planning to provide. Happy to go into any more detail on our concerns or answer any questions.
Thanks, Maggie.
Maggie, would you show that map again briefly, please?
Sure. Let's see here.
While you're pulling that up, I'll note that today, the county of Santa Barbara posted an interactive map related to their housing element.
Mhm.
And it shows areas that are, they have to meet, the regional housing demand as stipulated by the state. And so I looked at the map and I was not surprised, but still happy to see that the county does not list these properties or any of this Bailey corridor as one of the areas where they could meet their housing demand.
Okay.
Outside of Carpinteria, there is a place where the county housing authority has a proposal. I don't think Carpinteria likes it. We're investigating it and have talked about it at our South County Roundtable. But anyway, that was something new that came out today, and I'm glad the county's not on board with trying to develop this area. I know they weren't.
We had a map recently of all the infill available in Lompoc. Do you remember where that was, Morel?
I don't.
I don't either, but
I could ask Art Hibbets, he might have it.
there's a lot, but the issue is getting anybody to do anything on it. Nobody's going to build if they can't build a whole bunch of stuff all at the same time, right? That seems to be the problem with infill, getting people who are willing to do the infilling.
Maggie, I had a question. We, thanks to Morel and the CPA for having the executive director of LAFCO give us a talk on the whole, what is this, the CDH Act, and what the new application that the city of Lompoc has submitted. Apparently they've committed to a number of things in their application, which includes the agricultural conservation easements and a number of other things, which I did not write down.
Yeah, I don't think I did.
It was,
So,
they also, it was something like some level of affordability, right?
right, yeah,
Yes,
affordable housing, infill inventory, exchange of RENA numbers, the regional housing needs allocation with the county, and the jobs housing balance evaluation. So apparently they committed to a lot of things in their application, in the new application.
Yeah.
So have you had a chance to review all of that in the light of this?
We reviewed, so when we first got their application, there was a deadline for LAFCO to determine whether it was complete. And there were a whole variety of documents that we reviewed, and we submitted comments, and we actually identified a bunch of deficiencies in the application itself. Because they very much, they're supposed to answer this Q&A process that looks at the ultimate use of the land, and they were really kicking the can down the road when it comes to conversion, kind of looking, essentially implying that they don't have to look at the impacts of conversion at this stage. And we disagreed with that. But unfortunately, on the very same day that our comments were due on this question of completeness of the application, they actually deemed it complete. So LAFCO didn't actually incorporate any of our concerns with respect to the completion of the comments. Since then, there was one submittal after the fact that EDC has not yet closely examined with respect to, there's some mitigation concerns that we're going to be taking a close look at when it comes time in the coming weeks, preparing for hearing.
Vijaya?
I'm sorry.
Yes, Morel.
Okay. Thank you for mentioning those, I guess, incentives that the city included. And as I was listening to them, I'm thinking that almost sounds, like something right out of the housing element. I was wondering, well, what is the connection? And Maggie, you're the lawyer, the different incentives that Vijaya was mentioning, would they influence, or are, at this point in their application, they're making these different promises. Is that relevant right now for the sphere of influence?
That's interesting. And to be honest, there's not a lot of legal precedent in these contexts. So these more nuanced questions, we're using the policies available to say how we think it should play out. Like we're saying that you do need to look at the end use of the land when assessing impacts at this stage. In general, when a company is doing something where they're relying on this type of mitigation, anything that would sort of decrease impacts, we would need to be enforceable. But I don't know under LAFCO policy whether there is anything that speaks directly to that question.
If they've included it in their project description, doesn't it become enforceable? If they've said in their project description that they're going to be doing conservation easements, and they're going to be doing affordable housing and all of this, all of that would make it part of the project, right?
Potentially, but at this point, I mean, once the sphere of influence is amended, I mean, we're just looking at what's the action before LAFCO. And if that's a sphere of influence amendment, then we would want, all of these things are not going to be incorporated by default. By default, once the sphere of influence is modified, if that's all that LAFCO is doing, then we need to be really careful about any potential that would come down the line. I don't want to get ahead of ourselves about what their mitigation is what those issues are going to look like until we've had a chance to research them.
Am I right in observing that there is no project at this point?
Correct.
There's no specific project, so it's very difficult to, I would say, it's kind of putting the cart before the horse. They're promising these things, and there is no project.
Correct. So the action itself is just the sphere of influence amendment. It's not approval of any kind of project or annexation itself.
So when the city, when I can kind of envision somebody getting up and saying, oh, we're going to do this, we're going to promise this, and we need the housing, who will put the kibosh on that discussion? I mean, would that be up to you, or do you think was Mike Baker, the executive director?
I think we certainly need to be prepared to rebut those arguments at the hearing. Okay. In our comments, we would affirmatively rebut that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
the other thing that I took from the Monday presentation, he announced at the end that there's been a slight change in personnel in LAFCO, but it won't take effect until January. And one of those is that the mayor of Lompoc, who was just reelected, she is now going to be on LAFCO. And maybe you can, so that's why I'm kind of glad the hearing is going to be in December, because there were two mayors, I guess, that I remember at the hearing that you attended a couple of years ago. It seems so many of them seem to be supportive of the city in this idea that, oh, the city should be able to do whatever it wants. You remember that, I'm sure. And, you know, if it had gone to a vote that day, it would have gone. It would, you know, that was in, I think, way back in 2017 or 18. Is that right?
Yeah, I was actually on maternity leave at the time, so I do not have any recollection of the hearing.
Oh, I
but
thought you were there.
EDC was there,
No,
yes.
it was
another
Alicia.
attorney- It was
Yeah,
Tara.
yeah.
Tara
Okay.
Messing, I believe.
Well, okay. If she has gone on record, is there any way in January, would she have to recuse herself when that comes before LAFCO? Since she's already on record, although it's a new project, I guess not. I don't know if they start from scratch.
It's the basic idea is the same, whether it's a new project or not. It's, you know, first she has to get sphere of influence passed, right? Does she, and that's a really good question. I don't know why she could vote on it.
That is a
Think-
great question.
I would think she'd have to recuse herself.
Okay.
I mean, this is a government body. People have to take oaths to sit on this body, right?
I think so.
So, yeah, conflict of interest would have to hold then, I believe.
Does she have interest though in the property, like financial interest, or you're just, or are you
Not that I
saying
know of, no.
just because she's spoken in favor of
Yeah.
this as a counselor or as a mayor,
But it
I
wouldn't,
don't know if that would create a conflict?
it would not.
Well, I mean, no, she doesn't own private property, but she, yeah, I guess
I think
that's
she-
why it
I-
wouldn't
I
apply.
mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Maggie, but I think she could support it as a Lompoc counselor or mayor and support it as a LAFCO commissioner as well.
I would want to verify that, and given that this meeting is not confidential, I would prefer to have a
Yeah.
chance to look into those issues before we take a position.
You're not recording it, Ken?
It is being
yeah.
recorded.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah.
We won't share it widely, but there were a couple of our members who asked for it, but it's good to be careful for sure.
Yes. Well, it sounds like there was, I wasn't part of this presentation. All I received was the letter that stated the commitments to, you know, preserving ag land, but I did not see any type of like presentation. It sounds like there was some interesting promises made. You said there was a presentation on Monday from LAFCO to.
To the Citizens Planning Association. We
Okay.
just had the executive director, right? Come and tell us what LAFCO is all about and what the CKH Act is all about and who's on LAFCO and that sort of thing.
And talked
And talked about Bailey Avenue. Yeah.
Was that meeting recorded?
Yes, it was. Yeah,
Okay.
you can go on the
If you could share
CPA,
that
go
would
on the
be great.
CPA website, and it's there.
Okay, great.
And it's right toward the end. I brought up the question, you know, about, well, he brought it up and let us know who the new members were, you know, Alice Patino and Janelle Osborne, replacing Holly, somebody from Buellton. And it was another, I think another mayor.
Holly Sierra.
Oh,
from
Etta
Buellton.
Waterfield. Etta Waterfield is being replaced by Alice Patino. And then Holly from Buellton is being replaced by Janelle Osborne. But again, it doesn't take effect, I don't think, until January. Okay, another thing that he explained, because I mentioned, when I had attended that hearing in 2017, that, it was really articulated that by several people, they were just kind of taking a straw vote, I guess, and, that I heard. And again, somebody had to probably watch that, but this idea that, oh, the city should be allowed to do what it wants to do. And that it came across by, from several people. And I asked Mike Prater on Monday, but that's not what LAFCO is about. That's not, that's not the policy of LAFCO.
Right.
And here you have commissioners, and I asked him that question, do the commissioners have to support? By the very fact they're on the commission, the policies of LAFCO. And he said, no, as executive director, he has to educate and make sure they have all the facts in front of them. But it's up to the commissioners themselves, what their take is going to be on it, which disturbed me, thinking, well, you're on the LAFCO and you've got, 4 priority issues, coming down from the state. You should be trying to enforce, that approach. And he said, no, that's, they get to vote the way they want to get to vote, the way they want to vote.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want, since we haven't fully fleshed out this issue of the conservation easements, I mean, I can say just off the record that there's a lot of questions that we're gonna obviously have about it. They say that they want to ensure preservation of land on a 1-to-1 ratio. So based on the loss of prime ag land from any future development that occurs. But I think our position will most likely be like, don't convert it in the first place. And there's some case law that runs against this idea of the 1-to-1 ratio being sufficient. So I think the idea of like really stressing the importance of these particular parcels in their entirety being preserved as prime farmland instead of, piecemealing together these policies or easements that may or may not, I mean, they're pretty vague in terms of what I've seen about them so far. So I think we'd want to know a lot more about that. But it doesn't mean that there wouldn't be, I mean, even in their letter amending the application, they acknowledge future development that would occur on Bailey Avenue property. So it's not like these restrictive easements would avoid permanently destroying prime ag land.
That they're trying to mitigate some of the impacts by agreeing listing these commitments.
Right.
I suppose, yeah. So the staff report will be out on December 1st, he said. So that'll be interesting to look and see how the staff has analyzed it.
Yes.
I have a
That's
question.
another date I should have mentioned.
I have a question that sort of goes back and maybe is a little bit more basic, but like you're saying, there's no reason why they would do the sphere of influence application except in the future to do an annexation, like to try to annex it. So why is it like, why does LAFCO have it as 2 different steps? Like what would be a reason to only do a sphere of influence application?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I don't know since I wasn't actually part of that earlier meeting, I'm happy to defer to Ken's thoughts about that. But I think it's less burdensome to meet the requirements for the first stage and just deal with that before moving on to the second, because I think it gets messy and a lot more information is needed. So at the time of the application, LAFCO had a whole handful of requests for more information from the city. So my just impression is that it's easier to cut off pieces and start with one step at a time.
I would say that's almost certainly what's happening here. I have heard of cases, I can't think of where it was up in the Sacramento area or somewhere, where a city wanted to expand their sphere of influence because they wanted to prevent the county from building leapfrog development on their outskirts. I don't think that's what Lompoc's up to here. I'm sure.
Now,
it's-
Mike
So-
Prater actually said that the reason why they've submitted this new SOI application is to test if LAFCO would authorize the annexation or not.
Yeah.
So
Is
they would just it's a test.
But if a city expands their sphere of influence, they can't develop it, but nobody else can either, like the county can't either.
I think that's the case. If it's in the city's sphere and the county would have a hard time, or maybe be impossible, to approve development within the city's sphere. So I have heard that argument. Again, that's not what's happening here.
Yeah, right. But the like Lompoc won't be able to develop any projects unless they annex. Is that right? Okay.
Right.
What about the fact that it's only the two parcels versus, aren't there 6? The whole Bailey Avenue corridor, they seem to be piecemealing it. Is there, what's that strategy?
I think that what it is that these are 2 properties that are owned by people that would like to get
Mhm.
within the city's sphere and would like to see the development. And some of the other properties aren't interested in it. Have I got that right, Janet?
I'm not sure, Ken.
That's what I think.
I mean, those segments along Bailey Avenue have switched back and forth, so that doesn't match Art's map, for instance, does it, Morel?
Well, I have seen this one with the 2 parcels previously, but only recently. It used to
Yeah.
be the whole chunk, you know, when we,
Maybe
maybe even as far as 2017, Maggie. Yeah, it was all of this,
this whole area.
the whole area. Yeah.
Oh. Yeah. What's this Bodger property? Do you know what this
Well,
is?
it's across the street from Ocean, so it's, if you want to say it's contiguous, but it's all these, all the land not in yellow, not circled. That's also what we consider the Bailey Avenue corridor.
Oh.
And the last time when this was presented, it was all the properties. So like now all of a sudden, we just have these 2 little, I would call them slivers, but as you say, it's 137 acres total. 137 acres, yeah. So Maggie, as a, you know, as a legal argument, I mean, do you think, I guess they can do that? But again,
Are they
there's no-
including the Bodger property in the sphere of influence application,
Yes,
or
Yeah.
just Bailey property?
it's both properties.
Oh, well, if if LAFCO agrees to give them the sphere of influence thing for these 2 properties, then they're going to say, well, the property in the middle, it just makes sense to simply include that too, right, in the future.
Well, I think that's an important reason why they should deny it at this point. Is just like, well, look at how it's configured, and essentially like we're, limiting, it just makes it much more likely that the neighboring properties would be interested in conversion.
Yeah.
But I do think, I mean, the whole point of the creation of LAFCO is to avoid like sprawl and leapfrogging and, promote orderly development. So this does not seem orderly.
And preserve ag land too, right?
Right. There's really strong language. It's just, preserve prime farmland, period. So yeah, I think looking at their arguments about how somehow annexing and converting this farmland, but, mitigating some of the impacts, like we definitely need to look more closely at that. But I think just the really fundamental requirements of LAFCO policy would not be met with conversion even with restrictions.
Yeah.
Could have all the homeowners who buy in any of those projects commit to growing all their own food.
Victory vegetable gardens everywhere. There's that. Mm.
When I look at this map and then remember what was presented, in the previous iterations of this, just from a legal standpoint, can, let's say in our arguments, because at one point they were looking at, there was a plan. I mean, they were going to be putting 1,200 homes out there. They had, ideas for mini malls. I mean, it was pretty huge, a school. But again, that's all gone by the wayside now. The last time I heard anyone talking about it, they want this not to be, as you say, they're saying in this thing, affordable housing. They wanted that, to be more upper moderate types of housing, more quote unquote executive housing. So I don't know what they're planning.
Yeah, we don't have a lot of information at this point about the plans, and I think that might be in their best interest to try
Yes.
to downplay the development, but there's certainly acknowledgement of development for residential uses.
Is there, how much infill land is there within the city of Lompoc for development? I mean, is that a consideration by saying, look, you've got so much infill land, why don't you do that first? You shouldn't be going outside the boundaries.
Yeah, and I think
I
we
think there
flagged
is,
that.
yes.
Go ahead.
I think there is.
I think the last time we were talking about it was almost 1,000 units are on the books already that have not been built, to include, I think it's what, 400 and almost 450 units up at the Y.
Oh, the Y, yeah.
When you look at what has been approved and has not been built, it's quite high. It might be a little bit less than 1,000 now, but that was the last number I remember that people used to throw out.
This is Gary. Does anybody know in Lompoc how many mobile trailer spaces there are in the city? Mobile park?
I don't know the spaces, but I know we have at least 4 very large mobile home parks. Maybe 5 that I can think of just off the top of my head.
I mentioned that because my understanding is that if there's enough land for mobile parks, I think that's an inexpensive, affordable solution. Is what I'm told. I don't know if that's reasonable, but
It's an inexpensive what, Gary?
I think Gary was saying it's a good way to get affordable housing.
Well, I assume that's what it is.
Yeah.
all those mobile homes. People are living in them because they can afford it.
Yep.
And they own them.
Are they permanently?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's kind of a misnomer, mobile home.
Yeah.
You park it and maybe you build a foundation and you're not going to be moving it, but you're probably renting the land and owning the home.
correct, you rent the land, and that's of course the issue is because the space, the trailer park spaces can be increased. That's always a tug of war. But I'm led to believe that that's perhaps one of the more affordable solutions for housing, even if it's not. Even if
it's interesting that they're going to do evaluation of the jobs housing balance. I guess they're hoping that the evaluation will show that there are more jobs than housing, and so that's why they need to expand to sprawl.
They'll be hard put to do that.
Oh, there aren't any jobs. I mean, jobs are limited, I would assume, in Lompoc, right?
Well, yes, we'd have a lot better economic standing if we had better jobs here.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure more people commute like out of Lompoc than into it.
Yeah.
So it's
And-
kind of a bedroom community for people who work in the South County.
Yeah, right.
Correct, absolutely.
I mean, the base is a large employer here. The school district, I think, is the second largest employer. And
Hospital is the third, I bet.
yeah, could be.
So does the base provide its own housing? I mean, or people live in the city of Lompoc?
They have both.
Oh,
They have a lot of housing at the base, but a lot of base people live downtown. I don't know what determines which.
the other thing they were talking about is the exchange of RENA with the county, RENA numbers with the county. Why would
Well,
they do that?
I mean, our community is so intertwined with incorporated and unincorporated all in one, in Lompoc, what we call Lompoc. So maybe that's why, I don't know.
So that means like the city says like, oh, we'll take on more RENA and the
Right.
county will have to do less.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted that, yeah.
Why
Yeah.
would that be like an incentive to LAFCO? Okay,
I would say it wouldn't be, but
yeah,
And Lompoc already
so
has
interesting.
so much affordable housing, that at least housing that's supposedly affordable. More than our share, don't we? Of course, the problem there is that affordable housing is not affordable these days for people who need affordable housing, so.
It's probably affordable to somebody who's got a job in the tech
Mhm,
world down in Goleta.
mhm.
It's not affordable to people who are working in the service industry in Lompoc. Probably.
We have people that commute to work in fast food restaurants in Lompoc, or I mean, in Santa Barbara.
Mhm. Wow.
Well, do we have any more questions for Maggie?
Thanks, Nadia.
Yeah, thanks, Maggie.
Yeah,
And
thank you all, and
Maggie.
thanks for flagging this presentation. I look forward to checking that out, and sounds like it has some more information than we've been provided, so. Great,
Yeah,
well,
well,
thank you.
we'll keep an eye out for the staff report, and we will also for your action alert, and we can share that with our members and with all of you. And yeah, more to come on this, I'm sure.
And if you haven't already bought a ticket to honor Hannah Beth Jackson, you can, because it's happening on Sunday.
Yes, we'll see you then.
Yes.
We will.
Does anyone have anything else they want to share before we sign off?
No.
This is I'll put the chat or the link to buy a ticket if you want for the Hannah Beth Jackson, but yeah, I think that's a good place. Or Ken, you look like you're about to say something.
No, I think it's a good place too. Like I said, if I falter, Nadia will pick it up, and I was just pausing. Anybody else have another chance? But I think we're all got all the questions asked and answered. And thank you very
Great.
much, Maggie, for
Thank
filling
you.
us in. and
Thanks, Maggie.
Be in touch soon. All right, thank you.
All right,
Take care,
bye,
everyone.
everyone.
bye-bye.
Bye-bye.